Nothing survives this except her and the 1,000 others who call Oymyakon home, where negative 71 degrees is just winter, where cities rise from permafrost, where 9,000 kilometers is one train ride. This is Siberia, where the coldest place on Earth became home. And if they can make this normal, what's impossible for you? Siberia. 13 million square kilometers. Larger than the United States and Europe combined. For most people, it's synonymous with one thing: cold. Winters here don't just break records, they redefine what cold means. 71.2 degrees below zero. The coldest temperature ever recorded outside Antarctica. At that temperature, your breath doesn't just fog. It crystallizes mid-air and falls as ice. Exposed skin freezes in under a minute. Car tires crack like glass. Steel becomes brittle. Even the air itself feels different, thicker, like breathing through a frozen cloth. And yet, across this vast, frozen expanse, life doesn't just endure, it thrives. Nearly 40 million people call Siberia home. Cities with hundreds of thousands of residents, towns and villages scattered across the taiga. Families who've lived here for generations. The question isn't whether humans can survive Siberia. They've answered that. The question is how do you build a life where the cold doesn't stop for 6 months? How do you raise children, run businesses, create culture in a place that seems designed to reject human existence? The Soviets tried to conquer Siberia with sheer force, gulags and labor camps. The Trans-Siberian Railway, built with the bones of prisoners. Cities erected on permafrost, defying every law of engineering. They saw Siberia as an obstacle to overcome. But the people who live here today, they see it differently. Not as an enemy to defeat, but as a reality to embrace. They've learned something the rest of us haven't. That impossible is just a starting point. That home isn't about comfort. It's about belonging. You're about to meet 3 of them. An elder in the coldest village on Earth. An entrepreneur in a city that shouldn't exist. And a conductor whose life is an endless journey across 7 time zones. Their stories aren't about survival. They're about something deeper. About turning the impossible into the everyday. About making 71 below not just survivable, but normal. The first lives in the coldest village on Earth, Oymyakon. Population 900. the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. To get here, you drive 11 hours from Yakutsk on a road that exists more as a concept than reality. In winter, it's a ribbon of ice carved through endless forest. In summer, it dissolves into mud. There are no gas stations for the last 200 kilometers. No cell service. No backup plan. The village itself appears suddenly, almost reluctantly. A cluster of wooden houses huddled in a valley. Smoke rising from every chimney because if your fire goes out in January, you have maybe an hour before your pipes freeze solid. Maybe 2 before the cold creeps through your walls. This is where Marfa has lived for 73 years. Born here, raised her children here, buried her husband here, never left. Her house sits on stilts, like every building in Oymyakon. Not for flooding. The ground beneath is permafrost, frozen solid year-round. If you built directly on it, your house's warmth would melt the ground below, and the whole structure would sink and collapse. So you elevate, you adapt. Inside, her home is small but warm. A wood stove burns constantly from September to May. The walls are thick, insulated with everything available. Reindeer hide, sawdust, layers of wood and fabric. The windows are triple paned, and even then, ice forms on the inside during the coldest nights. Marfa's morning routine in January starts at 4 a.m. She lights the stove first, then checks the water. In Oymyakon, there's no running water in winter. It would freeze in the pipes. So every house has barrels of water inside, kept from freezing by the stove's heat. She melts ice for washing, boils water for tea. By 5, she's dressed, not in layers, but in specific layers. Thermal underwear, wool sweater, thick pants, reindeer fur coat, fur hat, fur-lined boots, mittens over gloves. Each piece serves a purpose, each gap covered. At 71 below, there's no room for error. She goes outside to feed her chickens. Yes, chickens. In the coldest village on Earth. They live in an insulated coop with its own small stove. They don't lay eggs in deep winter. They barely move. But they survive. Like everything else here, they've adapted. The air at that temperature doesn't feel like air. It burns your lungs. Each breath is deliberate, shallow. You breathe through a scarf to warm it slightly before it enters your lungs. The cold is sharp, physical, almost solid. It presses against you. But here's what surprises most visitors. Oymyakon isn't miserable. Children still play outside, though only for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Neighbors still visit each other. Life still happens. It's just calibrated differently. Marfa tells me her coldest memory. January 1964. The thermometer hit 71.2. The record. She was 20 years old, newly married. That morning, the air itself seemed to freeze. Sound traveled differently, muffled and strange. Birds fell from the sky, frozen mid-flight. Her husband insisted they stay inside. But the animals needed care. So they went out together, moving quickly, working in shifts. 15 minutes outside, 30 minutes warming up inside. It took all day to do 2 hours of work. I asked her if she ever thought about leaving, moving somewhere warmer, easier. She looked at me like I'd asked if she ever thought about becoming a bird. This is home. Not despite the cold, but including it. The cold is part of who they are. It's shaped everything. Their resilience, their community, the way they value warmth, both literal and metaphorical. The way they measure time, not in hours, but in how long you can safely be outside. In Oymyakon, summer temperatures can reach 25 degrees Celsius. A 70-degree swing from winter. The same place, two different worlds. In summer, the village comes alive. Gardens explode with vegetables that grow almost manically in the 24-hour daylight. People fix what broke in winter. Stockpile for the next freeze. But winter is when Oymyakon is most itself. When the cold strips away everything unnecessary. When life becomes essential. Firewood. Food. Family. Community. Nothing else matters. Marfa's daughter moved to Yakutsk 20 years ago. Warmer. More opportunities. She calls every week, asking her mother to join her. Marfa always says the same thing, maybe next year. But she won't leave. Because Oymyakon isn't just where she lives. It's who she is. Every winter survived is a victory. Every spring that follows is earned. The cold doesn't defeat you here. It defines you. As I prepare to leave, Marfa hands me tea. Hot, sweet, strong. The kind of tea that's more ritual than beverage. She says something in Yakut, then translates, "The cold teaches you what matters." I ask what matters. She smiles. That you're still here to ask. Marfa's Siberia is survival refined to essence. 71 below made normal through ritual, adaptation, belonging. But 600 kilometers west, another kind of impossible is happening. Yakutsk. Population 300,000. The coldest major city on Earth? If Oymyakon is survival distilled to its essence, Yakutsk is something else entirely. Its ambition? It's a bet against nature. It's a city that shouldn't exist, built on permafrost that never thaws, where winter temperatures regularly hit -50. From above, it looks almost normal. Apartment blocks, office buildings, shopping centers, roads laid out in grids. But look closer. Every single structure sits on stilts. Massive concrete pillars driven deep into the frozen ground. The city floats above itself. The pipes that carry heat and water don't run underground. They can't. So they run above ground, wrapped in insulation, creating a secondary landscape of metal arteries suspended on posts. In winter, they steam constantly, turning streets into surreal corridors of fog. This is where I meet Dmitry. 32 years old, born in Yakutsk, left for university in Moscow. Everyone assumed he'd stay there. Warmer, more connected, better opportunities. He came back. Dmitry runs a tech startup from an office in central Yakutsk. Software development. 15 employees. Clients across Russia and Europe. The office is modern. Glass. Minimalist design. Fast internet. Espresso machine. It could be in Berlin or San Francisco. Except when you look out the window, you see ice fog so thick you can't see across the street. I ask him the obvious question, why here? Why not Moscow, where it's easier? He laughs, says, everyone asks that. Then his face gets serious. In Moscow, I was comfortable. Good job. Nice apartment. Everything convenient. But I was also replaceable. One of millions. Just another programmer in a city full of programmers. Here, I matter. My company matters. We're building something that wouldn't exist if we weren't here. We're proving something. What are you proving? That geography isn't destiny. That you don't have to leave to succeed. That Yakutsk can be more than a cold place people escape from. His office building is new. Finished 3 years ago. Designed specifically for extreme cold. The windows are quadruple glazed. The foundation goes 30 meters into the permafrost. There's backup power, backup heating, backup for the backup. Because at minus 50, systems don't just fail. They fail catastrophically. In January, when it hits minus 55, Dmitry's commute is 10 minutes. Not because it's close, but because that's the maximum safe time outside. He leaves his apartment building, walks quickly, breathing shallow, enters his office building. His car stays parked. Starting an engine at that temperature means warming it for 30 minutes first. It's faster to walk, but Yakutsk doesn't shut down. Schools close only below minus 55. Businesses stay open. People go to cafes. The city has a theater, museums, universities, a thriving restaurant scene. Life doesn't pause for cold. Dmitry takes me to a cafe near his office. It's packed. Young people on laptops. Families having lunch. The windows are frosted completely opaque, but inside it's warm, bright, almost aggressively normal. This is what people don't understand about Yakutsk, he says. They think it's all survival, all hardship. But we have culture, nightlife. We have ambitions beyond just not freezing. He tells me about the summer, how the city transforms, how temperatures can hit 30 degrees, how the Lena River, frozen solid for 8 months, becomes a highway of boats, how everyone spends every possible moment outside, making up for the winter darkness. Moscow has 4 seasons. We have 2. Winter and construction season. But it's winter that defines them. Winter that makes Yakutsk, Yakutsk. His startup is hiring. But finding people is hard. Not because of qualifications, because most young Russians want to move south, not north. Want warmth, not cold. The people who choose to stay or choose to come back like I did, we're different. We have something to prove. Not to the world, to ourselves. That we can build something meaningful in the hardest place. I ask if he ever regrets coming back. If Moscow ever calls to him. Long pause. Every January there's a moment. Usually around 3 in the afternoon when it's been dark for hours and won't be light for hours more, and it's minus 53, and the ice fog is so thick you can't see the building across the street. And I think, what am I doing here? But then I think about my daughter. She's 5. She's growing up knowing that when it's minus 50, You still go to school. You still see your friends. Life doesn't stop. She's learning resilience in a way Moscow kids never will. She's learning that impossible is negotiable. Dmitry's company just signed a contract with a European client. The client wanted to visit, see the office, meet the team. They came in February. -48. They lasted 2 days. Flew back early. Too cold. But the contract went through because the work was excellent. Because geography didn't matter. That's the point, Dmitry says. We're not here despite Yakutsk. We're here because of it. The cold filters out people who aren't serious, who aren't committed. What's left is a city of people who chose difficulty, who chose meaning over comfort. Before I leave, he shows me something on his phone. A group chat with his university friends from Moscow. 12 people. 11 still in Moscow. Him in Yakutsk. They message constantly. Share memes. Complain about work. Normal friend stuff. But there's an underlying current. They're curious about him, about his choice, about whether he's happy. Last week, one of them asked if his company was hiring. Said he was tired of Moscow. Wanted something different. Something harder. Something that mattered. Dmitry's thinking about it. He sent back the job description, told his friend what to expect. The cold, the isolation, the difficulty, but also the meaning, the community, the pride of building something where most people wouldn't even try. His friend hasn't responded yet. Dmitry thinks he won't come. Most don't. But the fact that he asked, that Yakutsk is even being considered, that says something. Because Yakutsk isn't just surviving anymore. It's attracting, drawing people who want to prove something. Who want to build something in the last place anyone expects. The city that shouldn't exist is becoming the city people choose. And that, more than any temperature record, is what makes Yakutsk remarkable. Marfa found home by staying. Dmitry found it by returning. But the third person I met, he found home by never stopping. 9,289 kilometers. Moscow to Vladivostok. 7 time zones. 7 days. 1 train. The Trans-Siberian Railway isn't just a route. It's a ribbon of life stretched across the largest country on Earth. A moving community. a home on rails. This is where I meet Anatoly, 58 years old, train conductor for 36 years. He's spent more of his life on this train than off it. We meet at Yaroslavsky station in Moscow. Platform 5. Train number 002. The Rossiya. The main Trans-Siberian service. Anatoly has worked this exact route for 2 decades. Moscow to Vladivostok. Vladivostok to Moscow. Every 2 weeks. Over and over. He's walked the length of Russia more than 400 times. The train pulls in. 30 passenger cars. Green and yellow. Soviet-era design, modernized interiors. Anatoly moves through his pre-departure routine with the precision of ritual. Check the heating. Check the water systems. Check every door, every window seal. At 40 below, a loose seal isn't an inconvenience. It's dangerous. We depart at 11:45 p.m. Moscow time. The first time zone of 7. The rhythm of the train is immediate. The clack of wheels on rails. The gentle sway. The smell of coal heating and tea. It's a world unto itself. Separate from the cities we'll pass through. Separate from the wilderness between them. Anatoly's domain is car number 9. Platzkart class. Open sleeping compartments. 54 passengers. Families. Students. Migrant workers heading east. Pensioners visiting relatives. Each with their own reason for choosing 7 days on a train over a 3-hour flight. Planes are faster, Anatoly says. Trains are better. Better how? Planes take you from place to place. Trains take you through. You see Russia, all of it. You feel the distance, the scale. By day 3, you understand how big this country really is. That changes you. His routine is unchanging. Morning begins at 6 a.m., whatever time zone we're in. He walks the car, checks on passengers. The elderly woman in bunk 23 who needs help climbing down. The young family with twin toddlers who never sleep. The businessman who pays extra for the lower bunk and keeps to himself. By 7, he's heating water for tea. The samovar at the end of each car is his responsibility. Keep it full. Keep it hot. Tea isn't optional on the Trans-Siberian. It's currency. Community conversation starter. Passengers gather around the samovar like it's a campfire. Strangers become neighbors. By the second day, they're sharing food. By the third, sharing stories. By the fifth, exchanging addresses, promising to stay in touch. Anatoly has seen it hundreds of times. The transformation. People bored in Moscow alone, anonymous, guarded by Vladivostok, their family. The train does that. We cross into the Urals on day 2. The boundary between Europe and Asia. There's a small white obelisk marking the spot. Passengers crowd the windows to see it. Take photos. It's ceremonial, meaningless, essential. Anatoly barely notices. He's seen it 800 times. What he does notice is the cold. By Yekaterinburg, it's minus 30 outside. By Omsk, minus 35. The windows frost over despite double glazing. Passengers write their names in the condensation. Draw pictures. The ice becomes a canvas. Inside, the car is warm. Almost too warm. The coal heating system runs constantly. Some passengers crack windows for air. The collision of inside warmth and outside cold creates ice sculptures on the window frames. Delicate, temporary art. Night on the Trans-Siberian has its own quality. The darkness is absolute. No city lights. No highway glow. Just blackness broken occasionally by a distant village. A single light in an enormous void. Anatoly sits in his compartment at the end of the car. Paperwork, maintenance logs, but mostly he watches passengers sleep, watches Russia roll by, watches his life pass in 7-day increments. I ask if it's lonely. All this time away from home. He considers this long pause. I have an apartment in Moscow. I'm there 4 days, then gone 14. My wife used to ask when I'd retire, get a normal job. Be home every night. I tried once, took a year off, worked at a depot, home every evening, regular schedule. What happened? I lasted 11 months. Then I came back. Because this train, this route, these passengers, this is my home. The apartment in Moscow is where I visit. By day 4, we're deep into Siberia. The landscape is hypnotic in its monotony. Forest. 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 Occasionally, a town, then forest again. Endless. The trees blur into a green-brown wall. But Anatoly sees details, knows landmarks. That bent tree means we're 2 hours from Krasnoyarsk. That bridge over the frozen river means we're on schedule. That clearing means we're passing the site where another train derailed in '98. 7 people died. He knew 3 of them. The train carries ghosts. We cross Lake Baikal on day 5, the deepest lake on Earth. In winter, it's frozen solid. The train runs along its southern shore for hours. Passengers press against windows. The ice formations are otherworldly. Caves. Cathedrals. Crystal structures that seem impossible. Anatoly has seen Baikal 1,000 times. Still looks. Still pauses. Some things you never stop seeing, he says. The dining car is where the train's social life centers. Shared tables, shared meals. You can't eat alone on the Trans-Siberian even if you try. Someone will sit across from you. Ask where you're going. Offer bread. Anatoly eats there once per trip. Always on day 5. Always the same meal. Borscht and black bread. It's tradition. His tradition. A young couple at the next table asks him how long he's been doing this. When he tells them 36 years, they're stunned. Ask why. Why spend your whole life on a train? Anatoly's answer surprises me. Where else can you watch the sun rise in one time zone and set in another and never leave your job? Where else do you meet 500 new people every 2 weeks? Where else is the journey, the destination? He pauses, stirs his tea. I've been to Moscow and Vladivostok each 400 times. But I've never really been to either. I've been everywhere in between. Day 6. We enter the Far East. The landscape changes. Mountains appear. The forest thins. Villages become rarer. We're approaching the edge of Russia? The Pacific is close now, though still invisible. Anatoly's mood shifts, becomes quieter. The end of the journey is approaching. That means turnaround. 14 hours in Vladivostok to rest, restock, then back. 7 days west. The loop continues. I ask if it ever feels like Groundhog Day. The same route, the same routine. Over and over. Every trip is the same route, he says. But different passengers, different weather, different me. I'm not the same person I was 36 years ago. The train has changed me every single trip. How it's taught me that movement is life. That home doesn't have to be a place. That community can form in 7 days and dissolve, and that's okay. That Russia is too big to understand from a map. You have to feel it. Spend a week crossing. Then you know. We arrive in Vladivostok at 11:20 p.m. 7 days after departing Moscow. The Pacific Ocean is 200 meters from the station. We've crossed an entire continent. Passengers gather belongings. Exchange final hugs. Promise to email to stay in touch. Most won't. But the promises matter anyway. Anatoly helps the elderly woman from bunk 23 off the train. Shakes hands with the businessman. Gives the twins from the young family small wooden toys he carved somewhere around Yakutsk. Then the train empties. Goes quiet. Cleaning crew comes through. In 14 hours, it will fill again. Different people. Same journey. Anatoly and I stand on the empty platform. The Pacific wind is cold, salty, nothing like Moscow. I ask him what he thinks about during the 7 days. What occupies his mind for all those hours? Lately, my daughter, she's 31, lives in St. Petersburg, has a good job, husband, daughter of her own. My granddaughter, I've met her twice. She asks when I'll retire. Come live nearby. Help with childcare. Be a normal grandfather. Will you? Long silence. Train engine cooling in the background. Ocean waves. Every trip. I think this might be the last one. That I'll retire. Stop moving. Be somewhere instead of between places. But then the train starts heading back west, and I realize this is where I belong. Not at rest. In motion. The journey isn't something I do. It's something I am. We part ways at the station. He has 14 hours before the return trip. I ask what he'll do with them. Walk to the ocean. Eat fresh fish. Sleep in a bed that doesn't move. Then get back on the train. Because it's home. 36 years. 400 crossings. 9,000 kilometers each way. 3.7 million kilometers total. enough to circle the Earth 92 times. All of it in Russia. All of it on rails. Some people search their whole lives for purpose, for meaning, for home. Anatoly found his at 22, on a train, and never left. Because home isn't where you stop. Sometimes it's where you keep moving. 3 stories. 3 different answers to the same question. How do you turn impossible into home? Now you know. But knowing isn't the same as experiencing. So you want to experience Siberia. Not as a concept, but as a place. Good. Here's exactly how. First, timing. Siberia has 2 seasons: winter and construction. Choose based on what you want. Winter runs October through April. This is when Siberia is most itself. Coldest months are December through February. January averages -40 in most places. If you want the full experience, the real Siberia, come in January. But understand what you're signing up for. This isn't uncomfortable. It's dangerous if you're unprepared. Summer is June through August. Temperatures can hit 25 degrees. Mosquitoes are biblical. But the midnight sun, the green tiger, Lake Baikal unfrozen, it's worth it. This is when most tourists come easier, more forgiving. The Trans-Siberian Railway is your main artery. 3 routes. The classic Trans-Siberian runs Moscow to Vladivostok. 9,900 kilometers. 7 days. Second-class tickets run $800 to $1,500 depending on season. First class doubles that. Book through RZD, Russian Railway's official site. Or use Real Russia, a UK-based agency that handles foreigners well. Don't just show up and buy tickets. Summer trains sell out months ahead. The train itself is an experience, not just transport. Bring food. The dining car is expensive and limited. Russians bring duffel bags of bread, cheese, instant noodles, tea. Do the same. The samovar in each car provides unlimited hot water. Use it? Bring slippers. Everyone wears slippers on the train. It's cultural. Pack light, you're in a small bunk for a week. Eye mask and earplugs essential. The lights stay on and Russians don't whisper. For Yakutsk, you fly. No trains. Flights from Moscow are 6 hours. Tickets run $300 to $700 round trip. The city has hotels ranging from $50 a night to $200. Book ahead in winter. Tourism is small but growing. Winter clothing in Yakutsk is serious. Your normal winter coat won't work. You need layers. Thermal base layer, wool mid-layer, down jacket rated for extreme cold, fur-lined boots, real fur hat with ear flaps, mittens over gloves, face mask or scarf that covers everything. Budget $300 to $600 for proper gear if you don't have it. You can rent gear in Yakutsk, but sizing is inconsistent. Better to buy before you go. Decathlon and similar stores in Europe carry appropriate gear. Or buy in Moscow before heading east. Oymyakon requires planning. No commercial tours run there in deep winter. Too risky. In summer, a few agencies offer trips. Expect to pay $1,500 to $3,000 for a multi-day package from Yakutsk. Includes transport, guide, meals, accommodation in local homes. You can drive yourself, but only if you're experienced with extreme conditions and have a reliable vehicle. The road is dangerous. Cell service is non-existent for long stretches. If your car breaks down in winter, you could die before help arrives. Not an exaggeration. Lake Baikal is accessible year-round. Irkutsk is the gateway city. Flights from Moscow are 5 hours. The lake is an hour's drive. In winter, you can walk on the ice. Ice thickness reaches 1 meter. Safe for cars. Tour companies offer ice driving experiences. Photography tours, ice cave tours. Summer Baikal is for hiking, swimming in the southern bays, island hopping. Accommodation ranges from homestays at $30 a night to resort hotels at $200 plus. Budget for Siberia overall. Backpacker level, $50 to $70 a day. Covers hostel beds, cheap food, local transport. Mid-range, $100 to $150 a day. Decent hotels, restaurant meals, organized tours. Luxury, $300 plus. But luxury in Siberia is relative. You're still in remote Russia. Currency is rubles. Credit cards work in major cities. Bring cash for small towns. ATMs exist but aren't everywhere. US dollars or euros convert easily in cities. Language is an issue. English is rare outside tourist zones. Download Google Translate offline. Learn basic Russian phrases. Russians appreciate effort even if your accent is terrible. Visas are required for most nationalities. Tourist visas are straightforward but take time. Apply 6 weeks before travel. you need an invitation letter. Hotels provide these when you book. Or use visa agencies. Cost runs $50 to $200 depending on your nationality and processing speed. Health preparation. Update routine vaccines. Hepatitis A and B recommended. Rabies vaccine if you're going remote and risk animal contact. Bring a first aid kit. Bring any prescription medications in original packaging with documentation. Russian pharmacies are good, but may not have your specific medication. Travel insurance is non-negotiable. Get coverage that includes evacuation. Medical care in major cities is adequate. In remote areas, it's basic. If something goes seriously wrong, you need to be able to fly out. Food in Siberia is hearty. Meat heavy. Dumplings, borscht, pelmeni. Vegetarians will struggle outside major cities. Vegans, good luck. Fish is excellent near Lake Baikal and the Pacific coast. Try omul, a local whitefish. Smoked, it's incredible. Safety. Siberia is generally safe for tourists. Violent crime is low. Petty theft exists in cities like anywhere. The real danger is nature. Cold, distance, isolation. Respect it. Don't wander off alone. Don't underestimate weather. Don't assume help is nearby. It often isn't. Best resource for planning is the man in seat 61. Website. Comprehensive Trans-Siberian Guide. Routes, booking, what to expect. Updated regularly. For Yakutsk specific info, contact Sakha Tourism. Official tourism board. They speak English. Can arrange guides, accommodation, winter survival courses. One more thing. Bring an open mind. Siberia will not be what you expect. It's harsher and more beautiful. More modern and more traditional. More isolating and more welcoming. All at once. The cold is real. The distances are real. The difficulty is real. But so is the reward. Because Siberia teaches something you can't learn anywhere else. That impossible is negotiable. That home is where you make it. That humans are more resilient than we remember. You don't visit Siberia to be comfortable. You visit to be changed. All the practical details, links to booking sites, gear recommendations, sample itineraries, they're in the description below. Everything you need to turn this from idea into reality. The question isn't whether you can handle Siberia. The question is whether you're willing to find out. You've met them now. Marfa in Oymyakon, where 71 below is just winter. Dmitry in Yakutsk, building a tech company on Permafrost. Anatoly on the Trans-Siberian, finding home in motion. 3 people, 3 different Siberias, but one truth running through all of them. The impossible became normal. Not because it got easier, but because they refused to let it be impossible. You asked how they survived 71 below? Now you know. Not through conquest, but through adaptation. Not by defeating the cold, but by making peace with it. Building systems, creating rituals, finding meaning in the hardest place. Their stories weren't about survival. They were about something deeper. About belonging. About purpose. About identity forged in extreme conditions. Marfa didn't conquer the cold. She made peace with it. Built a life that includes it. The cold shaped her, and she shaped her life around the cold. Neither one. Both endured. Dmitry didn't escape Siberia. He chose it. Chose difficulty over comfort. Chose meaning over convenience. And in choosing the harder path, found something Moscow couldn't give him. Purpose. Anatoly didn't find home by staying still. He found it by never stopping. By understanding that belonging isn't about a place. It's about a rhythm, a motion, a journey that never quite ends. 3 lives that shouldn't work, in a place that shouldn't exist. All of it impossible. All of it normal. And here's what matters. What they did in Siberia, you can do wherever you are. Not the specifics, but the principle. Whatever your impossible is, whatever you've convinced yourself can't be done, can't be survived, can't become normal, you're probably wrong. Because impossible isn't a fact. It's a starting point. It's the question before the answer. It's what pushes you to adapt, to build, to become someone who makes the impossible look easy. Siberia is 71 degrees below zero. Your impossible might be different. It might be a career change everyone says is crazy. Might be moving to a new country. Might be starting over after loss. Might be pursuing something that makes no practical sense. But the method is the same. You don't defeat the impossible. You make it part of your everyday. You adapt. You build systems. You find your people. You redefine normal. And one day you wake up and realize the thing that terrified you is just Tuesday. You've seen cold conquered, fire negotiated, but there's another impossible that swallows everything. Water, not the ocean. The forest, where trees grow from riverbeds, where homes float, where 6 months of every year the ground disappears beneath 15 feet of water. The Amazon, where isolation isn't measured in kilometers, but in how many days the river takes. Where indigenous communities live entirely off what the forest provides. Where modern civilization is the myth, not the reality. Where drowning land became home. That's next. Same question. Different impossible. The link is right there. Click it. Because the impossible is just getting started. What's your impossible? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. And maybe your story is next. Now go. The cold is waiting. And it's not as impossible as you think.